welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. He's a clinical psychologist and my co-host for, we're coming up on almost 5 years, man.
I know.
It's crazy.
Only because you've stayed sober.
Well,
it would have thrown a wrinkle in the show if you hadn't.
Crazy enough that,
That's true.
But this has been my safety net. This has been my way to give back. This is my way to keep grounded and rooted in the recovery community. Because every week we invite a new addict or a loved one of an addict on the podcast to talk about their story. And that was the whole principle and idea behind this podcast.
Right. Pretty straightforward.
The other part was watching me climb out of the dark hole I put myself in, or get myself right, or just explore this world of recovery. And speaking of that, my oldest daughter, Presley, she's been amazing. And because of her letter and how she wrote, my addiction It affected,
yeah.
Did it?
It's what you say in Ogden.
Oh, really?
It affected.
You're going to bring the Ogden jokes in? I get that. You're from Morgan, where your favorite color was clear and there was one street light. I don't want.
There's no street light in Morgan. What are you talking about?
Well, okay then. There you go. But how my affected her.
Yeah.
And last night I was lucky enough to sit at Weber State University in the D Event Center as she graduated with high honors.
Yeah.
I have a good daughter who graduated
with high honors.
High honors.
That is not easy to do.
That's a 3.8 or higher.
I know. I didn't have a 3.8 in high school.
She applied for 3 colleges.
Yeah.
And received scholarships to all 3.
Wow. Which ones?
Weber State, Utah State, and University of Utah.
3 good schools.
And she's going to go on to be a Ute.
Okay.
She wants to study to be a PA, something to do in the medical field.
I teach once a year. I teach a little course at the PA school. Really?
Yeah. And I think it's a wonderful field, and she is just a blessing to me, to everyone she meets. And it was kind of crazy because I'm sitting there getting a little choked up as
definitely
my daughter's getting ready to walk across and receive her diploma. And I'm sitting there with my girlfriend's daughter, Addie, who's a wonderful young lady, my son on the other side, my other daughter, Frankie, on the other side. Mm-hmm. And on the front row is my ex-wife, her husband, my ex-father-in-law, my ex-mother-in-law, and we're all there. I mean, there's 20 of us there.
Did you plan to sit together, or does that just naturally happen for you guys?
We plan to sit together.
You don't have to sit on other sides of the event center.
Now, at my graduation, my mom and dad were on complete opposite sides.
It's hard for kids.
That's really hard. I talked to my ex-wife. I said, hey, let's just all sit together because we're here to support Presley. And she was like, we get along great. Yeah. And she was like, yeah, cool. And then
your ex-in-laws like you, though?
Yeah. I talked to them quite a bit. Yeah. I think they like me. At one point they didn't, but I don't blame them.
Well, I think they like you from what I've heard.
Yeah. And so we're all sitting together, and it was cool, and everybody's, getting ready to cheer on Presley. And as she walks by,
when they say no, wait, save your cheers to the end. Are you guys that family that screams loud anyway?
Yeah, I got in trouble by my girlfriend.
I knew it.
She was like, that went too long. And I was like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I didn't care. I was excited.
You're in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carpe diem. I seize the day.
There you go.
And my daughter is kind of like me in the sense that she doesn't plan or organize well. So I've been asking her for the past...
Josh, does that sound like Casey at all? A little bit? Okay.
So I've been asking her for the past 2 weeks, what are we going to do on your graduation night? She goes, I don't know. It's kind of the same response.
Well, don't they have the lock-in thing?
They did do that, but that was at 10 o'clock till 2 in the morning.
Okay.
So there was a window between 7 and 10, and we were all there, and so nobody knew what to do. So I was like, well, why don't I take you guys to dinner? And I invited my ex-wife, my ex-in-laws, everybody. So we all went to dinner. And I'm sitting there, and we're talking.
Where'd you go to dinner?
The country club.
Nice.
Yeah.
After my son graduated, we went to Jake's Over the Top.
Well, and that would have been fine with us, but
it's not there anymore.
It was last minute, and we knew we could secure a table.
Nice. Country club. Okay, sorry, I'm derailing your story.
So we go there, and we're all sitting there, and my ex-wife's telling stories about the time I almost died because I had an embolism. And my girlfriend is telling stories, and my ex-mother-in-law is telling stories. My mom's telling stories, and I thought
they weren't all near-death experience.
No, there's a couple.
Okay.
I'm lucky to be here.
Interesting graduation conversation, but yeah, go ahead.
And it's just the way it went. And so we're sitting there, and I took a minute, and I looked back, and I was like, 5 years ago, this would have never happened. 5 years ago, this would have been a miserable experience for almost everybody involved. Had I stayed drinking, partying, and doing my
There's no way you wouldn't have been drunk by that point.
Yeah, there's no way. And I would have ruined her night. I would have ruined my ex-wife's night. I would have ruined my girlfriend's night. My parents would be upset. And I thought, man, there are so many blessings that I get because I'm sober.
Yeah.
And it was kind of cool because
I think it's really cool.
I mean, to this day, my parents still don't like being in the same room together.
Yeah, that's been tough, huh?
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so when you have parties, they'll take like shifts. Like my mom will come early and my dad will come late. Mm-hmm. And there'll be a little crossover, which is still awkward. But for the most part, you know, we all just moved on. They haven't.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we could all sit there and be there for my daughter as she graduates was pretty cool.
No, I think that's really great. And as sobriety makes those sorts of things happen, and now instead of trying to remember that night years from now, you'll never forget that night.
Oh, I got pictures, and it was wonderful. It was.
Well, congratulations to you and to her. She's a really neat young lady, extremely well spoken, great student. She's going to do great things in college.
I'm excited,
and I'm excited she's coming to the U.
Yep, she's going to be a Ute. I'm an
great.
Aggie, but I was like, okay, they're going to pay for it. Let's go there.
Well, you can supervise her better down in Salt Lake.
Well, she's going to live at home, like we talked earlier.
Oh, that's right.
She's going to live at home for the first year.
Yeah,
until she figures it out. But
that's not a bad idea.
No.
Yeah.
So we're talking about college. We're talking about education, and rumor has it you brought a little quiz for me.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be fun.
So you're going to take me to school.
I'm taking everybody to school. Whoever wants to chime in.
Professor Woolley. So maybe our guest can jump in.
Logan.
Logan Adams. He's with Fit to Recover.
Yep.
And he's going to be.
That's one of my favorite groups, by the way.
Yep.
I love those guys.
We're going to find out more about
Josh
his story.
Josh can jump in here. I do need the answer in the form of a question.
Okay.
Okay. I'll be a stickler on that.
I got you.
All right. So, using this particular substance causes the following. This is based on Journal of American Medical Association, May 2023 research. That's this month.
He always brings in these journals.
Yeah. This is fresh. Can you smell that? Fresh. Yeah. Certified. Okay. Teenagers who use this are 2 to 3 times more likely to have depression, suicidal thoughts. We're bringing that up because May is what month?
Mental Health Awareness Month.
That's right. They are also 4 times more likely if it becomes a disorder. That's just using it.
Okay.
They're twice to 2 to 3 times more likely to have depression and suicidal thoughts. But if it becomes a disorder, they're 4 times more likely to have those things. And they are much more likely than the average peer to not do well in school. They would not be high honors if they use this. They're more likely to skip school and get in trouble with the police. Adults who use this are 4 times more likely to develop the risk of peripheral artery disease. So we have something that causes mental health problems, behavioral problems, societal problems, and physical problems. What am I?
All right. Do you want to go first?
I'll try it. Yeah. What is cocaine?
Okay.
That is a great guess, but no.
I'm going to say
He did put it in the form of a question, so he gets a point for
it's
that.
Like the Price is
1
Right
point
format.
right there,
I love it.
I'm going to say, what is alcohol?
That is also well done in the form of a question. You get a point, but incorrect.
Josh?
Okay, for the sake of not going with an easy answer like marijuana, I'm going to say, what is caffeine?
He's going to say, what is caffeine?
What is caffeine?
It's not bad.
That is actually a creative but incorrect answer. I'll give him a point.
Okay.
It is marijuana.
What?
Oh, wow.
Marijuana makes you twice as likely just by using it to be depressed and have suicidal thoughts.
But its selling points are it's not addictive and...
But it is addictive because guess what? We
What?
have research that proves it. There's an addiction that I can type it in the computer and it goes right in your chart.
We've had somebody on the podcast who's addicted.
Yep.
Her DOC
And
was
I've had patients
marijuana.
who fit that. But it's also, it'll blow you out in school. You're not going to do well in school. You're going to get in trouble with the cops.
You're going to get
Much
not high
more
honors.
likely. You're going to get high, but not the honors part. And peripheral artery disease.
That's
in
crazy.
adults. And so it is not a safe drug, FYI.
All right.
So there you go. That's this month, Journal of American Medical Association. This isn't like, the Chang's Chinese menu research. takeout or
Yeah.
the dry
I know
cleaning pamphlet.
Okay.
This is a
Very
real
good.
journal.
Yeah, and I think as weed becomes more socially accepted and medically accepted, people are doing more research on it, and
Right.
more information is coming out.
Right, and we're finding that there are some ways to use both CBD and THC that might be helpful in certain ways, but people who are using it every day and thinking they're doing themselves a favor, they're not. So I just like to bring that up because I get such a backlash all the time from patients, parents, even teachers.
Don't panic; it's organic, man.
Yeah, just because it rhymes
Doesn't mean it's right.
doesn't mean it's right. Yeah.
You
Anyway,
mean those rappers are lying?
I don't know if they're lying so much as just manipulating us for financial gain.
Okay, I gotcha.
Yeah.
Hey, so we've got a wonderful show for you today. We just took a test with Dr. Matt Woolley. He's a clinical psychologist and a professor.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I would say adjunct, but I found out
I
that-
am adjunct in one department.
Okay.
But I'm an assistant professor.
Does that all
in the
fit
other.
on one business card? Nah. But our guest today is Logan Adams. He comes to us from the East Coast. You've been sober now how long, Logan?
So I got clean and sober December 20th, 2018.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So pretty close to me.
Very close, very close.
I like that. And he's been out here in Utah for how long now?
About a year and a half now.
And you're the general manager of Fit to Recover.
I am general manager and one of the personal trainers, yes.
And we're going to find
He
out.
looks like a personal trainer, doesn't
Well,
he?
before you got here, him and Josh were talking protein and reps and what to do. And when to cut.
Of all the days to be late,
Oh,
dang it.
I know.
The best fitness advice.
Yeah, we're going to find out
Do
Logan.
They have pre-workout.
Oh, pre-roll, or yeah.
They have the protein shake after.
Yeah. Do you like to get bucked up? I like to get bucked up.
Oh yeah.
Bucked up is a pre-workout.
Oh, okay. I think that's what my dad told me when I was crying when I was a little kid.
Buck up. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much the same thing.
Is it the same?
No. But you're listening to Project Recovery. We got Logan Adams' story coming up next. Welcome back to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, about recovery. I'm Casey Scott. That's Dr. Matt Woolley. Our guest today is Logan Adams, celebrating just a little over 5 years, right? Or close
Four.
to
It's four. A little over 4, yeah.
Yeah, and
Casey likes to round up.
I do.
It
Especially,
works. It
yeah.
works. It checks out.
But you're a new dad.
Yes, I am. Almost 4 months now.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
And
awesome.
that's an amazing experience. And you heard me talking about my story with my daughter and how much pride I have in my recovery gives me because I get to be a part of her life.
Yeah.
Do you find that as a motivation for you as well?
Honestly, if I hadn't found recovery, I wouldn't be here to even have a son. You know, I wouldn't have made it. I didn't even think I was going to make to be 30, and then I got clean and I turned 30, and then I didn't know what to do. 'Cause
Let me
I
ask
hadn't
you
planned
this.
that far.
How do you sell it to yourself that I'm not going to be here when I'm 30? Is that how hopeless it had gotten?
Yeah, that's where my rock bottom took me. I didn't expect to be 30. I knew how I was using that 30 was never going to be a part of my life. I'd never see that. I accepted it long before it kind of started to become a reality that I was going to die. I was like, cool, like all the greats die before 30, you know what I mean? And I just talked myself into it. That was going to be the way that I would go out.
But we've heard that before, right?
Yeah.
I mean, don't you think that, first of all, when you're young, 30 sounds really old.
Yeah.
Right? And then second of all, we talked about, marijuana use causing suicidal thoughts. But I think just drug use in general creates hopelessness. And so it's hard to imagine yourself living in the future doing good things if in the present you're addicted, you're hopeless, and 30 seems so old. It's like, I think that's the cutoff age where people stop imagining their future.
It's the hopelessness for a lot of us that keeps us addicted.
Sure.
Because you can't see a life outside of this. You can't imagine a life where you're not drinking at 7 a.m. You can't imagine a life of you going to a family party without alcohol or drugs in your system. It's like, because you look at people who do and you go, how do they do it?
Yeah.
It's like, because I can't. I want to, but I know me, and it's not in my DNA.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, if you use long enough, you rewire your brain to the point where that life is all you're going to know. I barely remember a life before addiction. Like, I have some core memories from like growing up, but in my 20s, nothing. All I remember is just using and then getting clean.
Let's start with a young Logan. Where does Logan's story begin?
So I'm from a very, very small town in Maryland, one stoplight.
All right, you guys win.
Yeah, right. And unfortunately, with the small town life, there's really nothing to do outside of, partying and drinking and, using drugs. We had a movie theater and a bowling alley, but you can only see so many movies and go bowling so many times before you're tired of it. So you went to high school, you played sports, you did drugs, you partied, and then you showed up for school on a Monday. And that was
I think
kind of
a
my
lot
life.
of people that don't really have much connection to the world of addiction, they assume small towns are sort of like pure and that nobody's partying there, that you're doing. But the reality is what you just said is very true.
Yeah.
In a small town, you're looking for mischief, you're looking for trouble, you're looking for something to do. And so alcohol and drugs play right into that, right?
For sure. I mean, when I moved to Salt Lake and saw like kids actually doing things besides that, or even when I went to college and met, other people that didn't grow up drinking or using drugs, I was surprised. I was flabbergasted that, you guys are just started drinking in college. Like I'm a seasoned vet at drinking and using drugs at this point. But yeah, I think I'm not going to say all small towns are like that. Mine was like that at the time. We had nothing to do with it. Facebook was just coming out. Like social media wasn't really a thing yet. So we had nothing to do. We'd meet up at a bonfire on a Friday night and you'd tell your parents that you were staying at, Bobby's house or whatever, and then, you'd get alcohol poisoning in a field somewhere. That's just how it went.
It's so matter of fact.
Yeah,
and
that's your
in a
weekend.
field somewhere. Do you remember at what age you had your first drink?
Oh, probably 14 or 15. But I didn't start with alcohol. I started with marijuana.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Because I had a pretty grand notion of marijuana. Like I saw, all the rappers smoking, all the, the people that were my idols in movies smoking. So I started smoking weed, and not coincidentally, I caught my first criminal charge not long after I started smoking weed.
Really?
So yeah, so I started smoking weed, and then I gave up smoking weed because I got in trouble, and then I started drinking in high school, and I wasn't really a huge fan of drinking, so I went, I knew friends that did drugs, and they kind of went hand in hand at that point.
Let me ask you this. What was the philosophy of your family regarding alcohol and drugs? Did they ever sit you down and have a conversation like this is bad or you're too young for this? Or was it don't ask, don't tell?
I'm sure they're going to listen to this. So I love you guys beforehand. But both of my parents drank every social occasion, every weekend. They got, messed up. And I had a couple aunts and uncles that used drugs. So it was widely known that, you drank at family parties, you drank often, or they would drink every day. They said drugs were bad. I will give them credit. They were like, yeah, don't do drugs. But that didn't stop me. I was going to try it.
So last week I gave a lecture to the medical residents on social learning theory, or sometimes we call it vicarious learning, and that's exactly what you're talking about. And so you just mentioned two major influences in your life, which I think are typical for teenage. What modeling do our parents and family give us?
Yeah.
And then what do we see in movies and music and popular culture? And what you're saying is, popular culture kind of made smoking weed look cool.
For sure, yeah.
And something you wanted to do. And at home, alcohol was part of all the events.
Yes.
And so you had that modeling.
Yes.
Do you think you were how much do you think your use at age 14 or younger was by this social modeling?
I would love to give that all of the credit for my choices, right? I would love to do that.
No,
but
not all of the credit.
I have friends that parents were the same way, and they didn't get addicted.
That's perfect, because addicts that come on the show, they never want to. You guys are so great, and this is a compliment, at taking responsibility for your addiction, that by the time we talk about it in retrospect, they usually downplay that social media part. But I'm going to play it up for a minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think before you were an addict, that probably had a huge impact on you. And in fact, the research is heavy and clear that things that are modeled to kids growing up, whether it's violent acts, the type of language they use, being a good student or a lazy student, and drugs and alcohol, we can highly influence, not perfectly predict, because you're right, there's some kids that grow up and for some reason that model doesn't look appealing to them, and they're like, my parents drank, I'm never going to drink.
Yeah.
Or rappers, they're dumb, I'm not going to do that, or whatever their thing is. But man, so many people say exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
I think I think it's perfect to take responsibility for your addiction, but I think for parents out there raising young kids like you're going to be doing, you have to be careful about the modeling, social media, popular culture.
Without a doubt. I mean, I definitely agree social media has a heavy influence on like generations now. And, my partner, she's amazing. We've had multiple conversations of how we're going to parent. And one of the key things is, if we fight in front of our child, we come back together and apologize, right? Because obviously,
you model the solution.
Yeah, just fights are going to happen between people. Yeah, but as long as we come back and practice good conflict resolution, right? Show our son that you don't have to drink or do whatever to have a good time at whatever social event or family event. Like, you can just be you, and that's okay. We're trying to set a different example than the ones, at least my parents set for me.
Logan, I don't know if it was like this when you grew up, but Dr. Matt, I think it was for you and I both. We lived in a generation where parents said, "Do as I say, not as I do."
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And as a kid, that is the most confusing thing ever.
Right.
It's because you go, well, that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden you hit a magic number, you can do this or you can say this, and so I think the modeling behavior right there is a classic example of that. Yeah. I'm telling you not to do this, but when you're looking at me all the time, I'm doing it, and so it's confusing.
I think that culture still exists. I do think it was more common. I have to say my parents were really great examples of things. So my parents would talk the talk and walk the walk, and I appreciate that. But I think you're right. That was more common in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and I still think, I talk to parents still to this day who struggle with that. Do as I say, not as I do.
So drinking wasn't your thing, and you said you had friends that like to do drugs.
Oh, yeah.
And so did you make the shift over to drugs pretty quickly?
Probably around 16, yeah. So I was going to parties in high school, and then, friends would bring out cocaine.
Is that back to marijuana or no? Okay.
Cocaine, yeah. Cocaine, and, I remember vividly the first time I ever did it, right? And this is how I know that this was unfortunately my first love. I was studying for a test, pretty big important test, and I had friends obviously that did cocaine, and we lived next door to each other where I was at the time. Frank comes knocking on the door. I had no one home, no parents were home. They're like, "Hey, we've got parents' night." They're doing their thing, right? Love them to death. I know they needed the time. Now that I'm a parent, I get it.
Yeah.
So he comes in, "Hey man, where's your parents?" I was like, "They're gone. Let's go to your room." I'm like, "All right." So I'm still studying, and he's cutting lines of cocaine out, and he's sniffing. He's like, "You want to try some of this?" And I'm gonna be like, "No, dude, I've got a test tomorrow." He goes, "Oh, it'll help you study better." I was like, "I'm in." Did it.
I'm going to test. This will help you study. I'm in.
I did it. I read the whole book that I needed to read probably in 3 hours, front to back.
Did you remember?
I remember this vividly. I remember
reading comprehension up or down. Oh, man.
Yeah. It was The Power of One. It was AP literature. Okay. I still remember the whole book.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I still remember the drip and spitting it out and him being like, "Hey, man, you don't spit out, when the cocaine drips down your nose and you swallow it because your throat's going to go numb." And it was just, "You okay?" You all right?
Josh is getting grossed out.
You okay? And it was definitely downhill from there, And unfortunately, the friends that, I used with in high school, some of them didn't make it, to this day. And a lot of them are still either running and gunning or they've gotten clean and sober and had kids and put their lives together like I have.
So did that become your DOC, drug of choice?
Yeah, that, and because I had to go to sleep, then alcohol came into play, and it was always Jack Daniels.
So at 16, you had your first line of cocaine.
Yeah.
Helped you get through a Power of One.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you remember it vividly. I mean, you told the story with what seemed to be a little bit of love, and
there's still a small part of it, which unfortunately is the nature of the disease.
No,
it doesn't matter how far I get away.
I'll talk about stories of back in the day of drinking and remember them fondly because there was some good times there.
Sure.
Unfortunately, it got to the point where the good times were far and few between.
Yes.
Well, and that's actually one of the problems with going back to what do we model to kids is people don't drink alcohol and use drugs because they're no fun from the beginning.
Exactly.
Right? It is fun. It alters how you feel. It's a good feeling temporarily. And sometimes, like Casey likes to say, until it isn't, right?
Yeah.
And so, the problem is that it's hard it's hard to talk about it only in a negative term, because when a kid has their first drink or uses drugs the first time, they're like, oh, my parents are lying to me.
Yeah.
They said this would be bad. I feel good.
Yeah.
So I actually think it's better to be frank with them and say, when you first use something, chances are pretty high you'll like it.
Yeah.
But it's downhill from there.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. In fact, it's never as good as the first time. And it may be a quick drop off the cliff, or it may be a slow, but it's never going to be good again.
Yeah.
And it'll get to where it's bad. But I think that's important when we talk to kids. You have to be honest.
So you're 16, you're doing cocaine. At nighttime, you're chasing it with Jack Daniels so you can get to sleep.
For sure.
Does it start to affect your schooling? You're talking about AP English.
No, I still did very well in school. It didn't start affecting any of that until I got arrested junior year. So yeah, it wasn't that long of a time, a year. So yeah, pretty quick. Let's be real, pretty quick. I got arrested, honestly, not for alcohol or cocaine, but for marijuana, because I wanted more money for cocaine. So I started selling marijuana, which in hindsight is a silly act. So I get in trouble, and because of the quantity that I was caught with, the state of Maryland put me into drug court, right? So they're like, but it was juvenile. Like, hey, this is 4 months minimum, blah, blah, blah. You stay out of trouble. It's super easy to do. They sold me on it. They're like, or, you're going to have to go here and leave home. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I get in there, and they're like, oh, by the way, this is 6 months. Classes 4 times a week. You can't play sports. You have to report to drug tests. You have to go to therapy, blah, 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 blah. And I did it. I wouldn't say I played the system, but I did what they asked of me, and I went right back. It didn't stop.
So did you stay sober during that first time in drug court?
No.
But you gamed the system a little bit, and you completed all the requirements they asked of you.
I did, yeah.
And then as soon as they released you,
the day they released me, my friends picked me up, and we got some cocaine, and I went on a nice 3-day bender. Yeah.
Still 16, 17 years old? Like that?
I was around 17 at this time. Yeah.
So I'm taking it you graduate from high school.
Not the original high school I was going to, no. So I got out of trouble for 4 months, got another charge. The state was not happy, and they said I could go to either this juvenile center, or if my parents could find an alternative one that they would approve, that they would go to. And I had great people in my life. I will never give them credit. I had a good football coach. His name was Bill. Bill actually did a lot of searching to where I could go to a school, graduate, play sports, do everything I needed to do. And he said, I found a school for you. You're gonna go. Like, you already talked to your parents. We talked to state. You're gonna go to this school. Then I was like, cool, I'll go. And then I show up to a Marine Corps military school. Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
My dad was so gung-ho about it. He's ex-Marine. I show up there, and they didn't tell me it was really military school like that until I get there. And I show up, and there's people in uniform, shaved heads, shaved faces, and I had like a little goatee at the time. And the first thing was said to me, he goes, I forget the captain's name. He goes, do you own a razor? And I was like, yeah, I brought one. He goes, cool, you've got 5 minutes to shave, come back down, full uniform, and get ready for formation. And I ran up real quick, cut my face so bad, because he was like, you have to shave your whole face. And he had someone go with me and watch me shave my whole face. So I went down to formation. I had a buzz cut at the time. He was like, your hair's too long. So like high and tight, skin tight on the sides. And I spent my senior year there, but in hindsight, I got to play sports. I made all state with football. I was able to work out. I got a college scholarship from playing lacrosse with them. I learned structure. Some of the stuff I still do to this day. How I walk's different. My posture's different. I always stand up to give handshakes. Yes, sir. No, sir. I learned a lot of fundamental habits that I needed.
Did you stay sober that year?
Yeah, the whole time. And when we went home, I would, because I was so scared of like messing up. And I would go home, my friends would be like, hey, we're going to party, and I would be just too scared to do it. I'd be like, no, because the military school's like, we're going to drug test you when you come back, because you're not one of our normal students. You are court ordered here. They never did, but they put the fear of God into me, to do that. But I still love that school. You know, that school holds a very, very special place in my heart. It's Hargrave Military Academy in Chatham, Virginia. The mountains of Virginia, nothing out there, but that school, and I love that school so much.
Oh, that's good.
So you graduate from there. You said you received a scholarship for lacrosse.
Yeah.
Where did you go to college?
I went to the University of Mississippi, which at the time was one of the top party schools in the nation.
Oh.
Yeah. When we finish the podcast, Google the Grove. That's where the tailgating happens. So I went there to play lacrosse, and I played lacrosse. I went to class for the first semester. Second semester rolls around. I joined a fraternity. I picked drugs up again. I still played lacrosse because I had to show up for practice. Started getting drunk in public, citations. I got arrested. And then pretty quickly I found out that, I had a problem and that I couldn't be a normal person in my, early 20s. So
What fraternity?
Phi Kappa Tau.
I'm a Sigma Chi.
Nice. So yeah, SEC school, fraternity, a lot of partying. Failed out, came home.
Figured out that you had a problem.
Yeah.
What caused that? I mean, that's a huge shift from being a young man who thinks he can do anything and is invincible to realizing you had a problem. What caused that?
So I woke up one morning in my dorm room and I started at the bar drinking and obviously doing cocaine. I woke up and I was covered in blood. Like I had a white button-up shirt, wore khakis, button-up shirts to go out. And I was covered head to toe in blood. And I thought that I had hurt someone or something had happened. And my roommate was like, dude, I found you on the pavement and you were just like, your nose was bleeding and I was still holding like a bag of cocaine in my hand. And he's like, I picked you up, took you in our room. And he's like, I didn't know what to do. I thought you were going to die. I was like, okay. So I knew I had a problem. And then the school was like, hey, your grades suck. It's time to leave. Try again. We'll take you back. Came home. I stayed sober for a while when I came home. And then I ended up picking cocaine back up around 22. And then...
why did you pick it up again at 22?
Because I make stupid decisions. I missed it.
But I mean, is it a little bit of life's not going where I thought it was going and I'm stuck here and... why not?
For sure.
But I think that's
that hopelessness, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The hopelessness. You go, well, nothing seems to be working out how I thought it was, and I got nothing better to do, and this at least, supposedly is giving me a little bit of fun, but is it really?
Going back to my hometown was the worst fear that I had. It still is my worst fear. I don't have anything against that place. I don't want to be another generation that lives and dies there, And when I had to go back, I was crushed. So I stopped using.
Because at one point, they're telling stories about you. You went to a military school. You got a scholarship.
Yeah, I had all my stuff together. Like, he's doing well now. And it's a small town, so everybody knows everybody's business.
Yeah.
I had a good job. I was working with my dad doing construction at the time, which, I was making good money. I had my own place. And I just kept getting around the same people. I just kept getting around those same people that I would tell them no, and they would accept the no. And then later on, a couple of days later, you sure? You want just one? It was always just one. Like, why don't you just try one more? You've changed. You've grown more. You
can handle it.
Yeah,
now.
You've accomplished this stuff. There won't be alcohol involved, or we'll go out. There won't be any cocaine. We'll just go out for a night, and it would always lead to the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So at 22, you pick it back up.
Yeah.
And how quickly does that escalate?
I managed it for a while, and then I ended up.
What does that mean? You managed it for a while. How long?
So I was one of the weekend warrior people where I could it would be like a Friday night or a Saturday night, and I knew I had to work on Monday, so I would stop on a Sunday and be cool the whole week. That's how I managed it. I could just at one point I was able to do that, and then it escalated to not being able to do that.
Yeah.
The disease just slowly kept picking up in my mind. Just talking to me all the time, like, hey, it's Thursday. Friday's tomorrow. It's okay. And then I'd be like, well, it's just Monday. Why not pick me up to get you started on the week? Let's start the week off right.
The week gets shorter and shorter as that thinking starts, right?
Throw a couple Taco Tuesdays in there.
Exactly. The week is
Cinco
Wednesday.
De Mayo.
Yep. And then it's just every day. And then I ended up progressing to opiates.
Why though?
So I have these nice, wonderful scars all over my face, on the back of my head. I was assaulted in a bar parking lot, right? And I'd already suffered multiple facial fractures from lacrosse and everything else, CTE from football, which I firmly believe like progressed my addiction, like especially my disorder. So I broke all the stuff in my face. I woke up in Baltimore at Shock Trauma University, which is one of the, in Maryland, you know it, if you woke up shock trauma, like things are not going well for your life. Like you probably aren't going to make it through. I remember seeing my mom, not seeing her, waking up, and they gave me Percocet 30 milligrams, right? Now, I took them as prescribed because I was a responsible person with that, because I was afraid of prescription medication. Oddly enough, I was afraid. So I took them for 18 months straight, the way that they told me to take them. And then 18 months in a day, they cut me off. They took me off opiates. They're like, hey, like everything's healed. You're good. Good luck, you know. Good luck on your journey.
What year is this about?
2013.
Okay.
Yeah. And then that's right when, you know, the opioid, you know, kick was going up.
Right.
Everybody was on prescription medication.
Because nowadays they wouldn't put you on
No.
opiates for 18 months.
No.
That's such a long time.
So yeah, so I
You remember
started on opiates.
they kicked you off.
Yeah.
How long did you go without?
So I went 3 days because I didn't know. You know, like I was still ignorant to the fact that you had to go through withdrawal on opiates. And I remember day 3 being like, I think I have the flu. Like, this is the worst thing ever. I remember laying on my couch watching Netflix and being like, I have the flu. And I had friends that used opiates that were like closet users. And one of them came over and he's like, hey, man, you okay? You look sick. I was like, dude, I think I have the flu. He was like, are you still taking your prescription medication for like your pain meds? I was like, no. He goes, oh. He goes, you don't have the flu, dude. He was like, you're dope sick. Like, you're going through withdrawal. And he just gave me a pill and I took it. 30 minutes later, I was like, oh, I have to do this every single day now. There's no like backing down from this. Because, you know, going to rehab was like taboo. Mm-hmm. You know, like I couldn't tell my parents like, hey, I have to go to rehab, because I honestly didn't think that I could play a role in getting there. Like I thought the doctor would be like, hey, he has to go. So yeah, I picked up prescription medication and that's when everything went bad.
At that point, you're doing prescription medicine.
Yeah.
Is cocaine still playing?
Yeah. Yeah. What's scary about that part is I couldn't breathe out of one nostril. So I was doing cocaine out of the one that I could breathe out of and popping pills, and I was trading back and forth because I had friends that worked in doctor's offices and they're like, hey, you still have multiple lacerations. Your face is still messed up. Here's this prescription. I'm going to write you it for this, or I'll fill it out on the doctor's pad. They're already signed. You pick it up. We'll split, you know, whatever you're going to get. You keep the rest as long as you take the risk in picking it up. So I would do that. I would trade back and forth. And that's how
that was actually really common
Yeah.
practice for scamming for opiates back in the day, because the docs did have actual pads. They don't do that anymore. It's
No.
electronic
Yeah.
now, right? And it's
Yeah.
double and triple checked, and we have a system. But that's one of the reasons that the crisis got so out of
Yeah.
control was you could have like an MA or somebody that just works in the office steal one of those pads that had the signatures on it, and boom, you're off to the
That's
races.
it. Yeah.
So now you're doing cocaine and opioids.
Sure.
And how long does that go for?
Many, many years.
At any point, does your family realize you've got a problem? Or are you pretty good at keeping it?
I thought I was good at hiding it. I think for a while they didn't know, and then like things started going missing in our house, right? And then prescription medication went to heroin because it got too expensive, and I only made so much money, and I can only steal so much or rob so much.
Walk me through the jump from opioids to heroin. At any point, did you ever say, because we've had a lot of people sit in that seat where you are today saying, heroin's dirty, I'll never do that.
Oh, I said that plenty of times.
That's a real druggie.
Yeah. Oh, I said that plenty of times, and then the pills dried up, and those same friends that started doing pills first were the same ones that started doing heroin first. And I remember being like, hey, like, do you know where, you know, any pills are, blah, blah, blah. No one could find any. And my buddy's like, look, man, I've got heroin. He was like, that's all I have. Stop calling me asking for pills. If you don't want to be sick, your first one's free. And I was like, well, you said my favorite word at the time, free. I was like, okay. So I went there and I'm like, hey, how do I do this? And I was so ignorant to heroin at that point that he was like, the only way that you can do heroin is to inject heroin. And I was like, oh. And then like later down the road, I find out there's many, many different ways to do it. So he, you know, injects me for the first time, and cocaine was, you know, a second thought at that. Like it was just heroin. Yeah.
From there it took over that quick.
Very quickly. Because I had already had an opioid problem, and the fact that like it was instantaneous, I didn't have to wait really for like my digestive system to, you know, absorb it. It was instantaneous, and it's still I remember that memory vividly as well, you know. And unfortunately, he's not here to, you know, go over this memory with me. But yeah, that's where it started, and then.
Now, I've asked this question a couple of times with your drug abuse. How quick did that escalate?
That one was the fastest. Like everything, when I say everything went downhill, it took maybe a month for like, because you could see track marks. I had moved out with my family. I was jumping from house to house with friends because, you know, I stole too much from them. They didn't let me in the house. They barely would want to talk to me. And I love them to death for that decision. That's what I needed. But yeah, everything was just downhill. And then I was an hour and a half away from Baltimore City. And in Baltimore City, it's still an open air drug market there. Really? You drive in, you roll your windows down, they call out whatever you want. You pull over, you give them money, they give you drugs. 5 minutes, easy peasy. And
it's still that way, huh?
It's still that way.
Wow.
It's still terrible. I went back not too long ago and had to go through Baltimore from the airport. It's still the same way. You know, it's like, it looks like the apocalypse went off, because I was on the west side of Baltimore, and that's the equivalent to Chicago. It's very dangerous. It's very drug riddled, like prostitutes, gang members, you know, addicts all over the street. You'll see hypodermic needles, sidewalks. Like people will overdose on the sidewalk and everybody goes on. Like it's just their day.
So you're now in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Is that because drugs are more accessible? You can find people to take advantage of? Is it all of it?
Pretty much. I mean, so I would buy them and I would come back to my hometown and sell heroin for double the price, right? Because everybody was afraid to go to Baltimore because they knew what it was. Everybody in Maryland knows how Baltimore is. And at that point, I just didn't care. I didn't care like what happened to me. I just knew that I had to stay high and I didn't want to be sick. So I was going back and forth to Baltimore selling. And then at one point I just said, you know, whatever, I'm not driving back anymore. I'm just going to live up here. And I lived in my car, and I knew enough people at that time to where I could work for drug dealers, sell what I needed to sell for them. They would keep me high. And that's how I lived.
But how dangerous was that? Like you're living in your car, working for drug dealers in Baltimore. Did you feel unsafe?
I didn't care.
You didn't care.
That was never a thought.
That sounds terrifying to me.
Yeah. That was never a thought that like crossed my mind, was how safe am I right now? What was on my mind the whole time was, how am I going to stay high, make enough money, or get in touch with whoever up there to be able to stay high? And then I met enough gang members where I didn't have to go a day without anything for a long time. And then my car was taken back, and I was living in abandoned houses, homeless for a long time, through winters, through summers, through spring, all of it. Still selling drugs, still rubbing elbows with gang members. People were overdosing. I can count on my hands and feet how many people I've watched overdose in front of me. Even less of that number that I was able to save with Narcan, because they just hand it out in Baltimore, right? They just hand you Narcan. The cops don't care. They catch you with drugs, they'll take it, they'll hand you Narcan, they don't arrest you. You're back on the street. I could have gone without it, but at the same time, I'm glad I went through it, because I'm who I am now because of it.
Do you feel, I mean, I know nowadays talking about trauma is sort of popular in various ways, but I mean, I think what you're talking about would be pretty traumatic for a person, watching people that you knew die from drug overdoses, living just, you know, moment to moment, not knowing if you're going to be okay, but only really caring about drugs. I mean, do you feel like that's been traumatic for you?
Oh yeah, I think that kind of helped me give up, seeing that not a lot of people made it a long time. Like I knew addicts that had been there for 20 years and they were gods to me because I didn't.
But they were probably the few, right?
The very few.
You think about what he just described, and it's a lot like somebody who went to war would describe, because you're in survival mode. Yeah. You're doing whatever you can to see the next day, and you don't have time to be afraid. All you have time is to stay alive and figure out how to get that next hit.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, do you have any PTSD from your time down there? Is that a thing? I don't know.
So when I finally went to treatment, I went many times, but I always turned down the mental health aspect of it when I went.
What does that mean?
So they would say, hey, you have depression or anxiety, PTSD, come to therapy. And it was optional where I went. I was like, no, I don't care about any of that.
I'm just an addict.
I'm good. Yeah. Like I'm not, scared. I don't have anxiety, anything like that. And then the last time I went, they're like, hey, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have PTSD. Like not everything is okay with you. And at that point I was so low. I was like, I agree.
All right. Before we get to that, a lot of people who sit in that chair where you're sitting today talk about their rock bottom. Sounds like you've been in and out many different rehab facilities, lived a life that only some people could, think about, and not actually go through. So what does a rock bottom for Logan Adams look like?
Which one?
The one that got you into your last rehab.
So I was still in Baltimore. I had been arrested the day after Thanksgiving. No, the day before Thanksgiving, right? And I'd been arrested maybe twice in Baltimore, and I had been caught with quantities of drugs. And I just so happened to get arrested with like a vial of crack cocaine. And the police officer was like, I just don't care at this point. I'm taking you down. Like, I need a break. And I get out. I didn't think anybody was going to bail me out. And I'm on a tier with gang members and, people that have committed violent crimes because I had a record at this point. And I'm sitting there and they call my name. They're like, hey, you bailed out. And I didn't call anyone. I didn't call anyone to bail me out. My family hadn't seen me. They didn't know what happened to me. Last they heard was that I was going up there, right? And they knew what I was going to do when I went up there. And they didn't hear from me for a week. And this was not a common occurrence for me to do. Like, I disappeared for years at a time. Like, at one point they thought I was dead. So my mom, she had the thought just to call. So she called Baltimore City Central Booking. And they're like, yeah, we got him. 1% of his bail. Call a bail bondsman. They called it. So she gets me out.
So she just had that thought out of the blue.
Yeah.
No reason to necessarily call, but she called. Yeah. And you happened to have just been arrested.
Yeah. So I get out the day after Thanksgiving. My mom comes and picks me up at 4 a.m. And there was a methadone clinic where I was getting high. And I convinced her, I had lied to her and told her that it was a halfway house that I could get to. And now I knew of halfway houses in Baltimore because I sold to the halfway house patients, right? I'm not a good person, okay? I'm like, hey, I'm going here. I need $300. They're going to let me in 6 a.m. So she's like, cool. If you need this money, I'm going to sit and wait for you to walk in. I was like, you can't come in with me because it's a HIPAA violation. She's like, cool, but I'm still going to sit by the door and watch you walk in the door. So she gave me the money. God bless her. I walked in the door. The lady at the methadone clinic said, are you a patient here? I said, nope, I'm not. My mom pulled off. I walked out. I went right back to the people that I had gotten arrested with because some of them didn't get arrested. And they're like, did you say anything? I did not. They're like, cool. Showed them my paperwork from when I was arrested. They gave me a decent amount of heroin and crack cocaine. They're like, cool, way to keep your mouth shut. We'll see you tomorrow. Stayed high for many days. This was cold at the time. I was in a hoodie, sweatpants, and bedroom slippers. I was in an abandoned house with other people. The church down the street was giving out jackets. They gave me a North Face jacket, which was a bad idea because I went and traded it. So I'm in a hoodie, sweatpants, slippers, freezing, right? Like physically shaking, huddled up with a bunch of other addicts. And we're all still getting high. And I remember waking up one morning and just being like, I'm going to die. I can't do this. And I hadn't been afraid to die at that point. and just a huge wave of fear hit me. I was like, I'm going to die. I can't do this. And I remember calling my mom, being like, I'm going to die. Like, this is real. Like, I'm not calling you for help. I don't want money. I just need someone to pick me up from this location, drop me off to the local jail back home, because I had a warrant. I was like, I'm turning myself in. I can't do this anymore. So they're like, we'll be there in 2 hours. I score enough drugs, right? Because I'm an addict. Robbed a couple people to get more, just in case. Called the adult drug court that I was in at this point. I'm like, hey, I'm coming back to town. I will be here at this time. Pick me up. I know I have a warrant. I haven't seen you guys in 6 months. And her name is Kelly Reynolds. I love her to death. We still talk. Kelly, when you hear this, thank you. She said, do you want to go to rehab instead? I said, yeah, I need to go to rehab. So they're like, cool, you just have to go in to the jail. We'll process you. We're going to release you to your family. Now, if you run from them, you're going to get all of your time that you had. And I was facing a significant amount of time at that point. If you don't show up on this date for us to check you into rehab, we're not helping you. They're like, this is it. I showed up, and I honestly thought that was the lowest point. The day I went to rehab, I got high, right? And I remember my dad was taking me and my buddy, my best friend that I used with this whole time, the one that introduced me to heroin, right? He was going the next day to the same treatment center. And my dad was like, just stay with us. Like, Logan's going today. You're going tomorrow. Stay with us so we know that you have another night safe. We go into Walmart in my hometown. I get high in the bathroom. I cry. I get high again and cry some more. I walk out, and my dad looked at me, and he was like, are you ready now? Like, you ready to go? Not in like any kind of like mean way, like just in a surrender. Like, are you ready now? Like, is this it? Takes me there. I go there, about 150 pounds. I normally sit around 220. And that's the last time that I went to treatment. And, I told him, I was like, hey, I don't want you to bring me anything. I don't want you to make this comfortable. I don't need anything, Went to treatment. I called them Christmas Day, told them I loved them. Merry Christmas. Called them New Year's, told them I loved them. Happy New Year. And then I was given the option to either go home by the court system, or I could go to a recovery house. And the recovery house was 10 minutes, from my hometown. And I was like, no, like, I've gone home every time I've done anything. I'm going to go to a recovery house. Went there, stayed there for 5 months, kind of built my life back together in that time.
Did your friend go the next day?
He went the next day. I tried to convince him to go the same one I did, because, we're still friends. We helped each other through treatment. I was like, hey, I get out today, you get out tomorrow, come to this one with me. Like, we'll do this together, hand in hand. I was like, you're my best friend, because I watched his, I know his little brother died. I took him to treatment before my addiction got gnarly. So he was like, no, I'm going to get out of town because town's my problem. And I understood that at the time. But he went to a treatment or a recovery house closer to Baltimore than I did. I was still an hour and a half away. He was like 30 minutes. So we get to the first NA convention we ever go to. We have a great time. But I can tell something's off with him, right? Like, thinking back now, it's like his eyes gave it away. Like, not his pupils, but like the light was like turned off again. And then a month later, I got the phone call that he had overdosed and died.
No.
Yeah. And the last conversation we had, he called me and was like, I'm using, I need help. So I was very tight with recovery centers. Like the one I went to, I called, the caseworker that had me. I'm like, hey, look, I'm pulling this favor. Whatever you need in the future, like, I'll be here for, but I need you to get, my buddy back in. They're like, yeah, cool. Tell him to call us now. I call him. He's like, well, I'm going to wait for this other one. I'm not going back to that one. I don't want to be embarrassed. And, the last things I said to him, not in a nice way, I was like, look, I'm done with you. I can't be a part, of you killing yourself. And those are the last words I spoke, like, to him. And that still haunts me, like, to today.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's hard to give set limits and give tough love.
Yeah.
You said you were appreciative that your parents did that for you.
Yeah.
Wasn't that what you were trying to do with your friend, I guess?
Yeah, yes and no, but I could have. I'm not upset over the decision, right, to set that boundary. I'm upset over the way I said it.
Yeah.
I could have said it with a little bit more love. That way, like, you know, in his moments, like his last ones, he knew that he wasn't alone.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's one of the tragedies about addiction is, you know, it rarely turns out the way we think it will. Sometimes it turns out positive in ways that people don't expect. And too often, the reason it is a tragedy is too often it ends in death.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for your loss. And I know you've had a lot of them, but that sounds like one of the toughest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got sober, and you're doing wonderful things in the recovery community out there.
Yeah, I was part of area service for Narcotics Anonymous. GSR. I ran hospitals and institutions, which brought the meetings into, you know, treatment centers. I was doing that. I was involved. You know, I was heavily involved, and then his loss kind of cut me deeper than I expected, and I kind of started to peel away from some of my commitments in NA and just started showing up just as a member, which I needed. I needed to heal at the time. And then, a little bit while after that, I came and visited Utah. I came to visit a friend, and now I'm here.
It's a wild story, man.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
It's hard to imagine this guy, 150 pounds, and homeless with slippers on, isn't it? I mean, the light is in your eyes, and I know exactly what you're talking about when somebody's using and that light's gone. The light's in your eyes. You know, how does it feel?
Honestly, there's good days and there's bad days. You know, like I'm never going to sugarcoat it. It's, you know, I do have the life beyond my wildest dreams, but not every day is a good day. You know, like I'm not always happy. I'm not always sad. Some days I'm just existing, and, you know, that's okay.
I tell people that all the time. It's okay just to be okay.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, we set this bar that everything's got to be Instagram worthy or Facebook, and you know, we're popping bottles, we're hanging with supermodels.
Yeah.
Some days you got a handful of crap because you just changed a diaper, and that's it, man. And that's okay.
And I think it's because as addicts, we're so used to that dopamine hit.
The highs and lows.
Yeah, that like we expect everything to always be up, and when it goes down, it's hard to understand why it's down. It's just down.
And it feels extra bad when it's down. Because you said something earlier, which was if a person uses enough, they rewire their brain. Yeah. And we know that quite literally that is the case. Do you feel like you're still fighting back that rewiring that all that drug use did for you? I mean, 5 years later, I would expect some of it to still be tough to deal with.
Yes and no. You know, I'm still an addict through and through. So just because I put down the drugs, you know, it doesn't mean I still don't exhibit addict tendencies. For example, working out. You know, I use that as a pretty valid source to make myself happy for a while. And then at one point it got to the point where I was like, oh, I might be a little obsessed with this. Like, this might be an issue to where I had to pull back how much I worked out or how hard. But yeah, rewiring, I don't really have thoughts of like smoking, you know, crack cocaine or shooting up heroin anymore. I have a very, very, very healthy fear of needles, to the point where when I got my COVID vaccine, I was like flushed, like about to pass out. Like, now I'm terrified of them.
And now you're general manager at Fit to Recover.
Yeah.
And the Fit to Recover program has 2 locations, one in Salt Lake, one in Orem. And the thing I tell everybody about Fit to Recover, and I often refer people to it as well.
I have as well.
It's an amazing community for fitness, for music, for nutrition, for just community in itself.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful place.
Service, a lot of service.
And so for those who don't know, give everybody kind of a 911 of what Fit to Recover is all about.
That'd be a 411, I think.
The 911. It's an emergency.
Yeah. Well, yes, it is. When you need it, it's an emergency.
So when I first came into Fit to Recover, before I had the job, right, I was told very explicitly, we're not here to, you know, get big or, you know, any kind of crazy nutrition. It's a community, right? And our 4 pillars are great, you know, fitness, nutrition, service, you know, our outreach is great. We talk to drug court, we do everything that you can think of, but the golden nugget that is Fit to Recover is the community. It's how tight knit we are. You know, I've led classes where people have been had their worst days in sobriety, and they still show up, and everyone will rally around them. Everyone will be on, on their side to help them out. That's one of the things that I love most about Fit to Recover. It's the community aspect, right? We have meetings there. Obviously, our fitness classes, music, art. We have everything that you can think of to keep you busy every single day of the week and to keep you safe, right? Whether you're there for an hour, whether you're just hanging out with us in our office the whole day, we don't turn people away. We love having people that need help. We love having people in recovery there. We will always help you. And that is the best thing about Fit to Recover, is that we don't tell you no. We're going to help you as much as we can. And if we can't, we are going to refer you to someone that can.
Oh, I love that. I love that attitude, because that goes back to one of our themes, which is what?
The opposite of addiction isn't abstinence. It is connection.
It's connection. Right. And I actually think that right there is one of the very most powerful psychological tools we can provide in any mental health capacity, including addiction, is positive connection. If you can find a positive connection, you're going to do better with whatever you're struggling with.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, you just heard Logan's story.
Yeah.
What are some takeaways? What are some things that stand out for you?
Casey always likes to quiz me with the standouts. So I've been thinking about it, and I'm going to go back to something that didn't seem like maybe the biggest part of your story. It certainly wasn't the most salacious part of your story, but it is definitely along the theme of connection, and that is Coach Bill.
Yeah.
And there are so many people that have the opportunity to be a Coach Bill.
Yeah.
And while Coach Bill's efforts didn't turn your situation around 100%, look what he did for you. He could have just been the coach who said, well, I'll write that kid off and stick somebody else in his spot, and his parents can figure him out.
Yeah.
But Coach Bill went the extra mile, and there are teachers and church leaders and just friends, parents. There are so many people that have the opportunity to go that extra mile, and I'm always impressed.
Yeah.
I think those people in our community make just as much of a positive difference as maybe the professional people do.
No, I wholeheartedly agree.
And I would say Coach Bill didn't fail. Because you still stand up today to shake people's hands.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that he gave you and was able to do, you do today.
Yeah.
And so because of Coach Bill, he's made a big impact on your life.
For sure.
And when I listened to your story, you said it so matter of fact. And I know you downplayed a huge part of it, not because of you were embarrassed, but just because it was just your average life. You just thought that was normal.
Yeah.
But, living in abandoned houses, huddling with addicts to stay warm, smoking crack cocaine, dealing with gang members every day. You listen to that, and you want to talk to some people who have loved ones that are addicts and go, because at no point were you really having fun.
No.
It was all about survival.
Yeah.
And it was getting what you need.
Yeah, I'm not sure any of his story sounded fun.
No,
it sounded horrible.
There were a few good parts. No, I don't know.
No, I know.
Like the wrong word. There were a few parts where I thought I was enjoying myself.
But the reality is that when you look back with a sober mind, and you really want to dissect it, at no time were you having fun.
No, I mean, I think that was my little slice of hell for 6 years. I got to experience, what that's probably like.
And because of that, you're more giving, you're more loving, you're more empathetic.
Yeah.
And it's made you a better person, and it'll make you a better leader, and it will give you the ability to shape and help somebody else. And you now will become a Bill to somebody.
I hope so. I think kids now are going to be a lot. They're more luckier than I was. It was still pretty taboo to be addicted to anything. Hard drugs especially. Now it's more talked about. It's more open. Addiction is a common theme now. Unfortunately, it's a common theme, right? But I think now, parents are more aware of what could happen. I hope parents are more aware of what could happen. If they're not there, and my son's friends, if I see a little piece of me in them, be like, hey, do you need some help? I got, this is where I came from. I
agree with you 100%. I think just in the last 20 years, there has been people who are in recovery have gotten loud.
Yeah.
And they're involved in our communities, and they're doing good things. And there are campaigns where people are donating money to bring awareness to the opioid crisis, to drugs and alcohol, to hopefully combat the idea that something like marijuana is safe and non-addictive, because it's not. And I think there is a culture now where we talk about it. Did we ever talk about it in high school?
Nope.
No. Like, you'd have the one assembly a year,
DARE.
Or like the
sponsored
DARE
by
program.
DARE,
Oh, yeah.
right? And actually, DARE has been revamped because of vicarious learning, which we talked about earlier. They proved that it was actually harming.
Yeah.
They've changed it now. The current DARE program does good psychology, but that you'd have that one program in school, everyone would snicker and laugh. And
I'd make the joke. DARE stands for drugs are really expensive.
Yeah, and stuff like that. And then we would go about our day, but our parents didn't talk about it. There were no billboards about it. So, I mean, thanks to people like Adam and others, Logan Adams. Sorry, man, got them both in there.
Don't worry, it happens all the time.
You know, people are having the conversation. I think it's great.
I love it.
Well, plus I think the way we portray addicts now in popular culture is completely different. I mean, you would think
That's
of
a good
someone,
point.
you know, hooked on heroin or crack would be, you know, an African American in inner cities. Like now, like it could be everyone. It could be anyone.
You want to
We've
blow your
had-
mind? Go Google Robert Downey Jr. 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And now he's top of the world, Iron
right.
Man, and killing it. But he was an addict, and he was in prison.
And sitting right across from us, we have a scholarshiped D1 college athlete who became an addict.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not the face that we used to put on it.
No.
Yeah.
We've had dentists, we've had surgeons, we've had all kinds of people willing to share their story, and that's what this podcast is all about. So thank you from the bottom of our heart for sitting down and all that you do with Fit to Recover and all that you are doing in the recovery community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Logan.
And in case you forgot, Dr. Matt, Project Recovery is what?
You and I and KSL. It's a KSL podcast, buddy.
That's right.
And Josh.
Yeah.
And Logan.
And we all need a bill.
And Coach Bills. All the Coach Bills.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.